be answered later. We'll throw straight back to you, Steve, for industry updates and version history on Exo. As you say, we're running a little bit behind, so let's go straight back to you.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm going to try and make up a little bit of time in this segment, which is always a challenge because there's a lot to cover. Firstly, I just want to talk about some industry updates. Of course, single touch payroll phase 2 is currently top of mind for a lot of us. We've all been very familiar with single touch payroll. Single touch payroll phase 2 is basically the expansion of the original work that the ATO has done around single touch payroll, with the aim of really streamlining the reporting obligations for us as employers, and also making it simpler for employees. A big part of that is actually how we remove the need for manual reporting, particularly to other government agencies as well. STP Phase 2 is really about getting a better all-inclusive baseline data set that includes all of the data required, not just for the ATO, but other government agencies as well. Now, STP Phase 2 was released with a deadline of the 1st of January 2022. I know you're all probably looking at your calendars and starting to be a little bit worried, but MYOB has secured deferrals, extending that compliance deadline to the 1st of July 2022, which is not far away, of course. In terms of the changes, these are 4 of the top ones. Firstly, tax file number declarations. In essence, the information from that TFN declaration will be included in the STP report, and you'll no longer need to send the declaration itself to the ATO. Employee separation certificates will no longer be required, as the reason for the employee leaving will actually be included with, again, the STP report. Lump sum e-payments will now be provided electronically via the Phase 2 reporting. And you won't need to provide any lump sum e-letters. And of course, also with child support, any options to include child support garnishes and deductions will now be included in STP reports, which means you don't need to provide separate advice to child support registrar. In terms of a few other minor changes, the employment type will now be included as a part of the employee data that's provided through STP Phase 2. Disaggregation of gross figures is a really key one here, in that we now need to report individual income types. It's not a single gross sum, but each component must be itemized, including, for example, salary sacrifice, overtime, and those other elements. And that's where there may be some work that you need to undertake during your Phase 2 STP transition, and also country codes where you're employing staff that are working overseas. The breadth of the change is quite significant, but for a lot of us, it may well actually be a fairly simple process. It's really about reviewing and updating reporting categories to make sure that we're meeting those new obligations, in particular, the disaggregation of gross. For many employees, it's just that mapping, where you currently aggregate different pay types into a single category, for example, grouping allowances and overtime. You will need to adjust your pay item structures. So there may be some work that you need to do there, and you may need some assistance in that. So please don't hesitate to reach out to your partner to review those requirements. In terms of next steps, support for STP Phase 2 in Exo Employer Services is to be released very, very shortly. We're waiting to confirm the actual version number. There was a previous version number, the last release in 2021, 2021.03. AU edition, of course, is a really important foundational release that you should be upgrading to in the meantime. That just sets a new baseline in terms of the certificates used to work with the ATO. So it's important to have that upgrade done in advance of your STP upgrade itself. And of course, contact your partner to ensure that you've undertaken that upgrade. And if you need any assistance with those transition steps before you actually cut across to STP Phase 2. Another change which we've talked about in previous user groups is around the payment times reporting scheme. This is a change that came into play in the 1st of January last year, which is essentially about reporting payments made to small businesses for those organisations with significant annual income. The scheme is really about increasing transparency around payment performance, supported in Exo 2021.2. If that's something that affects you or is going to affect you in the next financial period, just be aware and of course make sure that you're upgraded to that version. E-invoicing continues to be a theme. Released in 2019, we're starting to see significant traction, particularly around those organisations that are dealing with government or government agencies themselves. If there's something that you need to look at with regards to invoicing, there's quite a number of accredited service providers already that are dealing with the invoicing requirements that enable you to connect the people e-delivery network. Lots of information on the ATO website or the NZBN website, but don't hesitate to reach out to your partner if you need to talk through some of the specifics. In terms of our MYOB Exo releases, of course, we recommend customers to stay on a current and supported version of Exo. There's lots of benefits and lots of reasons to upgrade to Exo. Of course, lots of new functionality, some of which Murray covered within his demo sessions. That fantastic disconnect users feature, which is valuable for those of us that are running a little bit short on licenses, of course, is only available, I think, in 2021.3 or later. So you will need to be on a current version to get some of those features. Of course, we also see Microsoft making lots of changes around their operating system and application environments, as well as their server environments. So staying current on a recent version of Exo is really important to make sure that continuity of support for the Microsoft versions that you're using within your organization. Of course, bug fixes, the effectiveness of ongoing staff training, and ensuring ongoing MYOB support. In terms of the current MYOB Exo releases, the current oldest supported version is 2019.4.1. It was released in December 2019, and there's approximately a 2-year support window. So end of support for 2019.4.1 was the 6th of December 2021. So we'd recommend that you be running a version of Exo newer than 2020.1. Of course, the most recent release being 2021.5, which was released in February 2022. I know it's 2021.5, but hey, MYOB makes the choices on those version numberings. In terms of version distribution, we see a fairly big spread. There are a number of clients that are running old versions of Exo. Again, if you're one of those, we encourage you to reach out to your partner, start the conversation, and make sure you're getting the value out of the investment that you've made in your ERP application. MYOB tends to release between 3 to 5 releases each year. We've seen a significant amount of new functionality, and these slides just give a little bit of an overview of what some of those sort of key features are around each of those versions. Coming into 2021, we've seen 5 releases, really focused around finishing off some of the user interface improvements, some big feature drops around sales order deposits, stock enhancements, in particular the ability to manage stock movement transactions. The new disconnect then release with our disconnect or forced log off of users, and some improvements in 2021.5, just with some hot fixes to fix a couple of issues with stock average cost adjustments that came into play. The next release, 2022.1, is really continuing to focus on this theme around user experience and usability, really continuing to leverage the 2019.4 platform changes that occurred with MYOB's move to the Delphi Tokyo update, and really focused on the introduction of enhancements and features based on the prioritization of ideas from the MYOB Ideas portal. If there's particular needs that you have in your business, we encourage you to reach out to your MYOB partner, ask them to raise some ideas on the MYOB portal, and that's how we get essentially votes against new features and get awareness across the community of where the product direction should be heading for MYOB Exo as a product. As I mentioned, as a general rule, you should plan to upgrade every 12 to 18 months to stay on a current MYOB supported release, and also just making sure that that aligns with your IT environment upgrade strategy as well. Make sure you're having those conversations with your IT department or your outsourced IT provider, and that you're aligning your Exo releases with the changes to your platform and your applications around your Microsoft products. In terms of the actual methodology, we recommend a structured and consistent methodology to going through an upgrade release, particularly where you're currently running an older version of Exo. There's a real benefit to taking an approach where you test within a UAT environment. You go through a strict user acceptance testing. You ensure you're embracing the ability to train your users and retrain your users on those new features, and taking the advantage from there. And I'm going to quickly hand back now to Grant to move on with the next segment. Thank you, Graham.